Oh, hey there. You know, when it comes to new games, I try to keep a pretty open mind before I play them. Hell, I try to keep a pretty open mind even after I play them, whether I enjoyed them or not, because opinions about games can easily change over time. The thing is though, I'm not infallible. I recognize that sometimes I'll have a preconceived notion against certain types of games for no real reason other than I don't think I'll like it, or I didn't like other games in that genre. Isometric games typically fall into this category, as do roguelikes. And yet, there is one game that fell into both of these categories that after playing, I realized how utterly amazing it was. That's right, this is just another video about Hades. I found myself saying this quite often, but I'm sure that a lot of you already know all about Hades. And in fact, this series kind of banks on that being just another video about. But I also like to assume that the people who watch my videos have a pretty broad taste in gaming, like I do. So it's entirely possible that they just didn't get Hades, or maybe it slipped past their radar, or maybe, like me, they saw it and just didn't think they would like it. That, and well, I just want to talk about it, so here we are. Hades was developed and published by Supergiant Games, the same company responsible for games like Bastion, Transistor, and Pyre. All games I've never played, but they're all going to be added to the stack of games that I need to get to eventually. When coming up with the idea for Hades, it was after the release of Pyre, a game which they wanted to explore procedural narrative storytelling. The problem was, due to the nature of Pyre's gameplay, it was discovered that audiences didn't really play through it numerous times as intended. So how do you make an audience play through a game over and over and over again? You make it a roguelike. You see, the cool thing about Supergiant Games is, while making Hades, they wanted to open up the development process to the players themselves. The idea being that with player feedback, they'd be able to make the best possible game they could. Now the thing is, involving players in the development of a game can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Developers have to find a nice balance between their own original ideas and the absolute tidal wave of feedback that players are going to give when getting their hands on an unfinished game. If that delicate balance isn't kept, then you end up with a situation akin to Capcom and Mega Man Legends 3. But that's a story for an entirely different video. In 2018, the method Supergiant went for was to release Hades into early access on the blossoming Epic Games Store. Their reasoning being that Supergiant was still a relatively small team, consisting of only 20 members, so they knew that they could only support early access on one platform. At the time, Epic's focus was on that of content creators, which was great seeing as Supergiant was developing Hades with streamers in mind. While discussing what type of game they wanted to make, Supergiant had a couple of core ideas in mind. They wanted to make a game that could be played in short periods of time, could be expanded upon after release, but would also be relatively easy for anyone to pick up and play, which is how they came up with the idea of making a roguelike in the first place. As for the setting, creative director Greg Kasavin leaned towards going with Greek mythology, due to having an interest in it from childhood, with the original title being Minos, where you would take the role of Theseus and try to escape the ever-shifting maze of Minos. However, Supergiant felt that Theseus was just too boring of a character, and that the Minos setting would be too difficult to make a branching narrative from. Which, I mean, holy shit, did we dodge a bullet there or what? Because can you imagine playing the entire game as this dude? After doing some more research into Greek mythology, it was discovered that Hades was rather underrepresented in stories, and thus they came to the idea of having Zagreus, prince of the underworld, making numerous attempts to escape it. While it was released into early access in 2018, the full release didn't occur until September of 2020, releasing on Windows, Mac OS, and the Nintendo Switch. Later, in 2021, it was ported to the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X and S. So yes, Hades is a very accessible game. As for the reception, oh boy, it was certainly received alright. Hades was nominated for and won numerous awards, including, but not limited to, Best Indie Game, Best Action Game, Best Game, Best Audio, Best Writing, Artistic Achievement, and so much more. 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s, 5 stars, thumbs up. Hades received it all, but that meant nothing to me. You see, during 2020 and 2021, while Hades was receiving all of these awards, I took note, but honestly, I was pretty obstinate about it. I hadn't watched any gameplay really. I saw snippets and immediately said, this game isn't for me, and moved on. As I mentioned earlier, isometric design doesn't really do much for me, and I'm just not a big fan of roguelikes. But perhaps I just hadn't played the right ones yet. I hadn't written the game off completely yet, and honestly, it was kind of hard to avoid seeing it everywhere, so over time, my interest in it did slowly grow. Eventually, while at a Renaissance festival talking about video games with a friend, yes, I'm aware that is probably the nerdiest sentence I could have uttered, but I mean, you're watching a video about video games, so what did you expect? Anyway, my friend basically told me that Hades was indeed deserving of all the critical acclaim it was getting, and that the game itself was honestly a masterpiece. So I did what I always do in that situation. I bought the game on PS5, told myself I'll play it eventually, while leaving it wrapped in plastic and sitting on the shelf forever. And that's exactly what I did, until just a couple of months ago, when I finally decided that I'd grab it and give it a go. And finally, after all of that build-up, I sat down, ready to experience this supposedly mind-blowing game, and it was okay. I started my first run of Hades, and even quite literally said out loud, yeah, not a big fan of this isometric view, but I figured I'd come this far, so the least I could do was give it the time of day. I played for a bit and died 3 minutes and 38 seconds into a run, only to be sent back to the House of Hades, where I was greeted with various NPCs scattered about, including the lord of the house, Hades himself. I explored a bit, then made my way back to the courtyard, jumped out the window, and started my attempt anew. My next attempt, I made it a little bit farther, dying in Tartarus, but surviving for 6 minutes and 37 seconds. I was whisked back to the House of Hades and started yet again. This time, however, I made it to the first boss. Then I died. Again, and again, and again, and again. And at this point in time, me continuing on was just a matter of principle. I didn't want this game to be better than me, so I had to play it, out of spite. My 4th and 5th attempts, I made it back to the first boss, only to die again. But then suddenly, on my 6th attempt, I beat the first boss. And in fact, I made it all the way through the second area and made it to the second boss. Sure, I died, but I was making progress. At some point, I don't even know when, but something clicked. Maybe it'd been there from the very beginning, and maybe I was just being too stubborn to acknowledge it, but I was having fun. A lot of fun, actually. I really enjoyed this main character. He had a cool personality with a good dash of wit, but nothing too over the top. In fact, all of the characters had great personalities. The voice work was phenomenal, and the music? Oh man, the music. Composed by Darren Korb, who's done the music for all of Supergiant's games, he's described it as Mediterranean prog rock Halloween. And because that description probably means nothing to you, being a collection of 4 random words, I'll describe it as really fucking good. Seriously, even after watching this entire video, and you better watch this entire video. But if you still don't end up playing this game, at the very least, just go and listen to the soundtrack because it's really enjoyable. Every song fits the atmosphere of each room, each scenario, each encounter perfectly. So what is Hades? I've already talked about how it came to be and how I discovered it, but what is it? What makes it so special, so fun? Well, as already stated before, Hades is a roguelike built off of Greek mythology. You take the role of Zagreus, the only son of Hades, god of the underworld, on a quest to escape from Hades, the location. Your adventure takes you through 4 unique areas, being Tartarus, the lowest depths of the underworld, which has slow-moving enemies and easy-to-dodge traps. It's not a cakewalk, but it's designed in a way to help you get used to the game. Next up is Asphodel, which is normally, according to Greek mythology, full of lush fields of green, but due to some flooding, is instead a lava-ridden hellscape. There's a lot less safety to be had on the ground itself, and the enemies jump around a lot more here, tossing bombs and shooting projectiles. Afterwards is Elysium, the level that houses what would be the most heroic of entities. Here you will encounter shades which make use of various weapons such as shields, spears, and bows, as well as explosive chariots. Finally is the Temple of Styx, which has multiple paths for you to choose from, forcing you to work your way through a series of small rooms housing traps, satyrs, rats, and other creatures, a lot of which can poison you. The end of each path typically winds up in a large room with either a mini-boss or numerous enemies you must take down. Your goal in the Temple of Styx is to find a satyr sack to progress toward the outside. Sometimes this might only take you 2 tunnels to explore, other times it might take you all 5. You start the game equipped with just a sword. You have a normal attack which consists of a simple combo, and a special attack which is akin to a ground pound, creating a shockwave. You're able to dash, which gives you invincibility frames, and you can even dash attack. Lastly, you have a cast, in which you throw a bloodstone at an enemy, which then must be retrieved to throw it again. Your goal is to break out of the underworld by going through different randomly generated rooms filled with creatures. Each room has a reward of some sort for beating it, but we'll get to those in a minute. Clearing a room opens the pathway to the next, sometimes giving you multiple choices to choose from. Each section of the underworld is comprised of a set amount of rooms, ending in a boss for that region. At first, it might seem rather bare bones, but then on the second screen, you're introduced to Boons. Boons are power-ups received from the other gods in Olympus that are trying to aid you in your escape. When you encounter a boon, you will be greeted by the god for whom it belongs, giving you some story about themselves or your present situation before getting to choose one of 3 different power-ups presented to you. Each god has numerous power-ups available, and what shows up is also dependent on what you've taken previously. These power-ups can change your attack properties, your dash, your special attack, your cast, among other things, such as giving you money whenever you enter a room, giving you more dashes, or increasing your overall speed, and so on. Which boons you get is mostly random, but there are ways in which you can influence the next boon you find to help with a specific build that you may be trying to make. So how do boons work? Well, say you go for Poseidon. His boons are all water-based and have a pushback effect to them. Every enemy hit by your attacks that are powered up by Poseidon will go flying away and potentially take extra damage if they hit a wall or a trap. On top of this, your attacks will just do more damage as well. Some attack boons, such as Poseidon, will increase your attack damage by a certain percentage, while others, such as Zeus, will add an additional flat rate of damage to your attack. So for example, Poseidon's Common Tempest Strike will give you a 30% upgrade to your attack, whereas Zeus's equivalent, Lightning Strike, will add a set 10 damage to your attack. But notice how I said common there? That's because a majority of the boons have a rarity to them, being common, rare, heroic, and epic. This further powers them up. So for instance, the common attack boon for Zeus will add a set 10 damage to your attack while also shooting chain lightning that hits other enemies. However, the heroic form will add a set 20 damage to your attack while shooting chain lightning that also damages enemies. In cases like Poseidon, his common attack boon increases your attack by 30%, whereas the heroic version can more than double your attack. And yet it doesn't stop there, because there is another item called a Palm of Power, which you can use to level up your boons as well. Depending on the rarity of the boon, the effectiveness of the Palm of Power will change accordingly. So for instance, leveling up a common boon will give it a small increase in power, whereas leveling up a heroic boon will give it a much larger increase in power. There are 10 different gods with well over 100 boons split between them all. Depending on the boon you take, there are even duo boons where 2 gods will combine their power together for an even rarer effect. And lastly, each god has their own legendary boons to boot. So let's move on to the weapons, because while you start the game with a sword, it doesn't mean that you have to use it forever. In fact, there are 5 additional weapons you can unlock, being a spear, a bow, shield, fists, and a gun for some reason. I've already talked about the sword, but what about the others? Well, the spear allows you to attack a bit more from a distance with thrust attacks, while also giving you the ability to charge up and do a spin attack. You can also throw the spear and have it summoned back to you. The shield is used both offensively and defensively. You can swing it at enemies and it has a built-in knockback to push them into walls or traps. But if you hold the attack button, Zagreus will lift the shield in front of him to block attacks. Releasing the attack button will have him perform a bull rush, striking any enemy in his path. The special for the shield allows Zagreus to throw it and have it bounce off of enemies and walls, akin to Captain America. The bow is a bow. You can shoot it to keep enemies at bay and also charge up a power shot. The special shoots multiple arrows in a spread shot to damage multiple enemies. The fists are fast and great for stacking multiple debuffs onto enemies if you have the boons capable of doing so. The special attack is a powerful uppercut. And lastly is the gun. The standard attack fires bullets, which need to be reloaded, and the special shoots a large explosive and an arc down towards your enemies. But Hades wouldn't be Hades if it was just 6 weapons, because you see, each weapon has 4 different aspects to them. Changing the aspect of a weapon will not only change how it looks visually, but it will change the attack and special attack properties, as well as even some of your built-in character properties, like your health and your dash. So for instance, if you change your spear into the aspect of Achilles, your special attack changes from throwing the spear and calling it back to you, into throwing the spear and then rushing over it at high speeds. After performing this, Zagreus will be buffed for a bit, allowing his follow-up attacks to do more damage. Each aspect has its own unique playstyle, effectively giving the game 24 different weapons to choose from. Oh, but I'm not done talking about weapons yet. Combining the various assortments of boons with the 24 different aspects of weapons is already a lot and gives you a ton of replayability. And then there's the Daedalus Hammer. Think of these as boons that are specific to each weapon. Throughout each run, you will typically run into a hammer or two. Acquiring these opens up a menu very similar to picking a boon, with 3 choices to pick. But this time you're able to alter your weapon's properties. For instance, if you have a shield and grab the Daedalus hammer, it's entirely possible that you could change your bull rush attack into a charge shot. This will make it so that when you hold the attack button down, instead of charging forward upon releasing it, Zagreus will instead shoot a projectile out. These hammers can radically alter your playstyle, since both your normal attacks and special attacks can be altered, and just like the god boons, there are well over 100 different choices to choose from. So what about the chamber rewards? Well, there are coins that can be collected and used to buy items and boons from the shop run by Charon, the boatman. Gemstones are collectibles which can be used back at the House of Hades to make improvements to the house as well as unlock new features. Darkness and keys are collectibles that can be used in the Mirror of Night back in your room. More on that in a second. Palms of Power are used to upgrade your current boons. Nectar, which is a collectible that you can give to NPCs. And there are of course hearts for increasing your max health each run. There are also specialty rooms in each region of the underworld which house a special NPC that will help you in some way, complete with their own side stories, such as Sisyphus and Tartarus. You know, the guy that was doomed to push the boulder up a hill for all of eternity? Yeah, he's here and happy to chat. So with all of that in mind, what happens to those items when you die? Well, you lose them. Most of them anyway, but not all of it. Each time you die, and you will die one way or another, you're returned back to the House of Hades. But all is not lost. The boons, the Daedalus hammers, the hearts, the coins for Charon's shop, they're all gone. But any darkness, keys, gemstones, and nectar are all yours to keep. Darkness is almost akin to experience points. In your room is the Mirror of Night, which, when you interact with it, will open up an upgrade list. These are upgrades for Zagreus, and they're as permanent as you want them to be. By spending Darkness, you can increase your attributes, such as how much health you have, how many dashes you can do, how many bloodstones you're able to throw with your cast, along with other attributes, such as raising the chance of finding rare, epic, legendary, or duo boons, as well as a lot of other features. Every row of perks has 2 versions, a red version and a green version. You can freely swap between the 2 once you've unlocked them, but only one can be active at a time, and when you level up one of them, it does not level up the other. So for instance, the 8th perk down is the red perk, Thick Skin. Each time you level this up, it will give Zagreus 5 more health, for a total of 50 health when maxed out. However, if you select the icon on the left, you can flip this into the green perk called High Confidence. This allows Zagreus to deal 5% more damage as long as his health remains 80% of its total. When maxed out, it will allow you to deal 25% more damage as long as your health remains above 80%. So it's a bit of a high risk, high reward scenario. Or you could simply take the safer option and go with more health. The choice is entirely up to you. As you do more runs, you'll gain more darkness to level up more and more perks. The keys acquired are also used here to unlock more perks themselves to choose from, as well as unlocking access to the weapons mentioned previously. As for how you unlock each aspect, well, let's just say there are even rarer collectibles, sometimes obtained from bosses and other means, used to not only unlock some of the aspects of your weapons, but can also be used to permanently level up your weapons as well. So what about the gemstones? Well, they can be used in an NPC called the House Contractor to make various visual improvements to the House of Hades. But you can also unlock new features that will affect your runs, such as adding treasure troves to certain rooms, or adding fountain rooms, which are safe rooms where no enemies spawn and you get a free heal. As for the nectar, this is another big part of Hades, the story and the character interactions. The House of Hades is home to numerous NPCs which can be interacted with, each having their own personality and stories to tell. You can further befriend these NPCs by giving them nectar to grow closer with them. The NPCs are a big reason as to why I fell in love with this game to begin with. First of all, the voice acting is just phenomenal. There is not a single bad voice actor here. And in fact, when you look at the credits, you'll even realize that a lot of these characters are voiced by the same voice actor, which is truly a testament to their talent. They react to everything you do, and I mean everything. Did you die to a specific enemy or trap in the game? Because if so, Hypnos will be sure to let you know about it. Maybe when you were out in the underworld, you encountered a character like Sisyphus. Well, then you can bet that somebody back at the house will have something to say about it. These types of interactions aren't just limited to the House of Hades either. The various gods of Olympus will often interact with you the same way when you acquire their boons, either commenting on a previous god you just spoke to, or your weapon, or even your weapon aspect. In fact, even the bosses have an insane amount of dialogue to them, commenting on your actions, your weapons, your choices, everything. This is definitely one of those features that I could explain to death, but the weight of it really isn't felt until you experience it for yourself, because every every playthrough is different. I have put a ton of hours into Hades now. I'm very close to platinuming it, and yet when I sit down to watch Sam play her file, she still gets dialogue options that I've never even seen yet. Now here's the thing about the story. While it isn't exactly the most unique, it is very full, but not in a bloated filler sort of way, but that it has a lot of substance. If you know anything about Greek mythology, then you already know these characters and you know their stories, and yet Supergiant was able to put their own spin on it without deviating too far from the source material. The gods in this game feel like a big, relatable, dysfunctional family. Everybody's happy to help Zagreus, but they all have their own opinions about each other and will be quick to judge you if you choose one character's boon over another. Being a roguelike, that means every run is a totally randomized seed, so the second room you see in the first run will be different than the second room you see in the second run, and so on and so forth. It might not seem all that appealing to die, lose your progress, and have to start again, but at the same time, Hades does an absolutely wonderful job of making you feel like even when you die, you're always making some sort of progress towards something. Whether it's the fact that you have more gemstones now so you can buy more things from the house contractor, or maybe you died but you acquired a bunch of darkness so you can get more abilities from the Mirror of Night. Abilities which will ultimately make your progress through the game much easier as you acquire more. The first time you give nectar to an NPC, you acquire their keepsake. Every keepsake you acquire slowly levels up by clearing rooms, so even if you don't complete an area fully, you're still making progress towards leveling up your keepsakes. There are so many things to work on in Hades, so true to Supergiant's original goal, whether you want to play for long periods of time or just in short bursts, at no point does your time ever feel wasted. And that, to me, is incredibly important for games nowadays. Some of you may be wondering, how did I have such detailed information about my first attempts down to the minute and how I died? Well, it's because the game told me. One of the unlockables you can acquire is access into a chamber that gives you detailed information on every single run you've ever done. How you died, where you died, the time it took, what weapon you were using, what boons you had equipped at the time. It's awesome. On top of this, you can also see a detailed breakdown of your weapon usage, boon usage, even which hammer abilities you like to grab the most. If there is one very simple way to give me a drop of dopamine, it's by adding stats to your game. Just let me know everything, because I like to see arbitrary numbers go up that don't mean anything, and Hades has that in spades. So for those curious, I made it to the final boss on my 13th attempt, and I got my first clear on my 16th attempt. So feel free to compare that to yourselves and tell me if I'm way better or way worse than you at Roguelikes. Hades is a game that is 100% deserving of the praise it received. It is very clear to me that Supergiant put an extraordinary amount of love and passion into making this the best game it could possibly be, and I really think they nailed it. If you're the type of person that doesn't like isometric design or roguelikes, I still think you should give this game a try, because I'm that person too, and it's that good. I think it's entirely possible to just dislike certain genres of games, and that's fine. Everybody is welcome to and has their own opinions. But at the same time, I do think it's important to try games outside of your comfort zone from time to time, because it's possible that one game can be the exception to your own self-imposed rule. For me, this was that game when it came to the isometric viewpoint and the roguelike nature. If you've watched any of my other videos in the Java series, you might have noticed that I don't really give number ratings because for the most part, I think it's kind of pointless. But if I absolutely had to for Hades, it's an easy 10 out of 10. I don't say that lightly either. It's because I can't think of a single thing that warrants improvement when it comes to Hades. The only thing I could ever ask for from it would be more. Be that a DLC with more boons or a location, I wouldn't care. I would literally take anything. Please, if you haven't already, do yourself a favor and give this game a try. For those of you who have played it, how do you feel? Are there any changes you would have made? How many times did it take to get your first clear? Let me know in the comments. That being said, my name is AJ, and this was just another video about Hades. There are coins which can be collected and used to buy items and boons from the shop run by Charon, the boatkeeper. The boatman. Whatever.